Well, I think it's good enough to start. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully everybody's having a great time so far in the conference. Today, we have a great presentation lined up for you, as always. But before we get to the presentation, I do have to go over some house duties. This is going to be an educational credit presentation as well. And I would also like for you guys to participate in the survey to give us more feedback, to make sure that we're always giving you relevant information. And I'm going to be putting that all into the messaging bubble. So that's the way you guys are going to be interacting with me. So let's make it fun. Keep on asking questions. And Dane is going to try to make some time to accommodate for that, do some Q&A. And I think he's also going to break up his presentation as well. Not going to take too much time. I'm going to go ahead and let Dane go ahead and start the presentation. And I will be posting the link shortly, okay?
Okay. Thank you, Prince. I appreciate it. Just so I'm not distracted, I'm going to close the chat, but certainly let me know if anything comes up. Before we begin, I just want to thank PayMaster and their partnership. We've been working with them for a number of years, helping their clients be able to weather the storms of unemployment, and we are in a big one right now. But I think it's just worthwhile noting that not many payroll providers provide you with conferences like this, free information. So shout out to them for just being a great partner for us, but it seems like a great provider for you as well. So thank you for including us today. So like I said, we work with PayMaster, but today's presentation is not about gaining sales. It's more about helping you all through this tumultuous time. So I will be gearing this towards helping as much as possible. If you have interest further, certainly reach out to PayMaster afterwards. We'd love to have a separate conversation, but today is more about helping you right now try to get through this. Just as far as expectations for the presentation, I'll be providing general information, but like if you saw when we were in here before, there are very state-specific differentiators in how COVID's being dealt with, and really, A, I can't know it all, and B, we just don't have time to cover it all. So certainly we can reach out afterwards, get you some information, but just know I'm keeping it fairly general as well. To that effect, we will be providing guides, and that's what Prince just mentioned, is a link that will have guides for COVID. It should have everything you need to at least start answering the majority of your questions, and that is state specifics, who's charging, who's not, different factors there in the COVID landscape. And then we will be doing a quick break for questions just halfway through. I think after 25 minutes, I think Prince will jump in, or I will, just so we can have some quick questions to address based on the slides I've worked through, and then we'll give 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll do some at the end as well. So really, the one big thing to get out of this is not only the information I'll go through, but the worst is over as far as unemployment. I'm imagining some of you are shell-shocked from what's happened. We assume that things will get better, but just know that you're through the worst. There's still things to go, but just try to be positive throughout the experience as best you can, because it's a nightmare scenario. So as Prince said, my name is Dane Swenson. I'm an account executive over at Corporate Cost Control, where we handle unemployment claims since 1965, back when they were on paper. It's a little better now, but if you've dealt with the states in the last few months, you realize it's not that much better. I myself started in handling claims. I then jumped into hearings, kind of trial by fire in Boston, Massachusetts, where I represented clients for a number of years. Now I'm out in Denver, Colorado, and I just assist our clients with making sure that they're getting the numbers they need, answering questions, things like that. So I've really been through A to Z of the unemployment industry. I know enough to be dangerous in tax. That's the one thing I haven't really touched. So hopefully if you have any specific questions, I can address them. But again, just to keep expectations in line, I will not know everything off the top of my head, especially because I might give you an answer today that changes tomorrow. Things are pretty wild right now. So just wanted to go ahead and kind of recap how unemployment works. This will be very quick, but I want to make sure everyone's on the same page as we're discussing unemployment. So the key players in unemployment, I have friends who don't really know what I do, but they know I handle unemployment for employers, and they assume unemployment is federally paid. It is not. It is an employer to state unemployment agency to claimant relationship. So you all, as the employer, are paying for these claims one way or another. you are providing, whether you're reimbursed or taxed, we'll get into that in a second, but essentially you are funding the state unemployment agency, who then doles out the money that you have provided to them to the claimant themselves. So you can see here, you're providing quarterly employee payroll information. Typically it's called a QCR. You pay the tax rate, or you pay dollar for dollar, and we'll get into that in a second. And they will go ahead and pay the claimant, who provides information to the state and generates the claim. So there's two types of employer funding, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but it's different for, I know we had someone here who was a reimburser and taxpayers. So it's a little different. I'll get into that in a little bit, how you're going to pay for unemployment and COVID. But it's just good to know that there are two types of funding. Tax paying, meaning you pay a tax quarterly for unemployment. They use the funds from that tax to pay the claimants. Let's say if it's 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, depending on the state, % of taxable payroll, that's what you're paying. There's also what's called reimbursables, and these are typically reserved for nonprofits, municipalities, things like that, where they pay dollar for dollar on claims. So if someone collects unemployment in the state of Colorado for $4,000, you are paying $4,000. So before COVID, it was really behooved organizations to be reimbursers, meaning paying for dollar. If you're a small company, paying dollar for dollar was much preferable to the tax paying system. But now with COVID, I don't know that that's actually the case, being that you all are paying large bills. And again, you're paying dollar for dollar, not the tax. And we'll get into how that is being paid in a bit, but that's really the differentiator. So if you hear me say reimbursable, that's dollar for dollar. Tax paying or contributory, that's someone paying a tax. And just to recap the unemployment process, this is the final kind of recap of the process before we dive into COVID. A separation is initiated. Let's say someone was laid off or they voluntarily quit. They will file for unemployment through their state website. A claim is filed. You all will respond to that claim. So if it's a lack of work or someone was temporarily unemployed due to COVID, you would respond in kind, as well as if there's a voluntary quit, you would. Now, this differentiates, is something protestable versus non-protestable. We have a ton of documents and information on our website I'll direct you to later if you have questions regarding the difference, but that's a whole 3-hour presentation. But just good to know, protestable being a voluntary quit without good cause. If someone is discharged for misconduct, we can protest those, win those, and you all shouldn't pay for those. Non-protestable is a layoff or lack of work. So if you shut down a location and you didn't have further work available to employees, you are paying for their unemployment, typically in a non-COVID society, but in a certain way you are now, and we'll get into that further. So if it's deemed protestable and we lost, we will get a determination stating as such. We could file an appeal, which would generate an unemployment hearing. That is a back and forth with the state and the claimant together to try to argue your case so that you all should not be paying unemployment, which leads to a decision, and then you can petition to the Board of Review, although that's very rare that you should be doing that. You have to prove an error in fact or law. So this is something we deal with anyways, COVID or not, but I just wanted to make sure we're all on board, getting some type of understanding how unemployment works. So I just want to quickly touch on major legislation as it pertains to unemployment in COVID. So a couple of things came out, and really at the beginning of COVID, March through April. The first being the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. I believe that was the first of the acts. And how this pertains to unemployment is what the federal government said is you all need to relax as far as your rules for unemployment agencies. So for example, there was what's called a waiting week, where if you filed for unemployment, there was a week lag time where you are technically waiting. You are not getting paid for that. Most states asked to remove that section so that the claimants were being paid immediately. Same with work search requirements. A lot of states have a requirement. Colorado, for example, I believe is 3 touch points per week, meaning you have to show or at least testify to the fact that you search for work. They waived that requirement. Some states, it is still waived to whether you have to search for work while you're being unemployed, but I believe those all will drop off. soon. But really, they just asked the states to change things as far as requirements there. And they also provided some funding for state unemployment agencies. So they gave them some money to help in assisting, their response time. I don't know if anyone's tried to call a state agency recently. That money did not help because you're still in wait times. You're still not able to reach the state. Some states are better than others, but in the heat of the pandemic in April and May, there was no way you were getting someone on the phone. I even have a direct line to the deputy director of a number of states, and even they weren't responsive. So it's going to get better. It is getting better, but they provided some money initially to assist. I don't know how much that helped. Included in the relaxed rules is just a general expectation that the states are going to send documents late to you all, and you all may respond to those documents late. So there is some forgiveness there where the federal government just asks the states, listen, if you're sending documents that are caught in the mail or you all are responding to claims late, that we're just processing the claims as best we can, kind of a mutual agreement there. And then there was the CARES Act, which included pandemic unemployment assistance, which I will get to in a second, emergency UI assistance for government and nonprofits, which we will dive into, emergency increase in UI benefits, which we also dive into. I have separate slides there. Temporary funding for the waiting week, which we had mentioned before, pandemic emergency unemployment compensation. We'll dive into that, and then short term. So this was the most significant bill that affects you all. So the pandemic unemployment assistance, we will be providing this slide deck afterwards so you can review at a later time. But really what that is a separate payment schedule to allow people who are not eligible for regular unemployment benefits through the state agency to be able to collect. That ends December 31st, 2020, and not to exceed 39 weeks. So this is something that you all should not be paying for. The pandemic unemployment assistance that is separate from regular unemployment. Emergency unemployment relief. This is for reimbursers, really. What happened, and we'll dive into it in a little bit, is what happened was the states wanted to charge 100% of the charges for you reimbursers out there, your nonprofits who pay dollar for dollar. What happened now is you all should only be paying 50% of those charges. I believe every state's on it, but the guide we have will indicate that. California, for example, and Florida, I'll touch up on. I don't know it as well as I do other states offhand. California, for example, they sent a bill for 100% of the charges. Let's say it was $100,000 that you had to pay. What a lot of states are doing is they are extending the payment due date. So Texas, for example, when they sent out their initial bills for second quarter, they said, you don't have to pay till the end of December, giving you all time to process that. As well, they also decided to apply the 50% relief. So a lot of them sent new bills so that you only have to pay 50% of what you are being charged. So for the example used of the $50,000 bill, I'm hoping that is before the 50% is applied from the state of Florida, but I'll need to look into that separately. And it should, if applied correctly, knock it down to 25. Now, if that's 50% of the 100,000 leaving a 50,000, that's a different story. And then emergency increase in UI benefits. This is stopped, but you all saw it in the news, I'm sure, where you could collect $600 per week. You all did not pay for that as employers. That was a government assistance, but it was a nice boost for claimants trying to collect unemployment. If you collected a single penny in unemployment, you were getting that $600 additionally. So that's why we saw, 1,000 times increase in unemployment claims as well, because a lot of people felt, why not? It's a lot of money to be collecting. And then this really pertains to the timeline that was given pre-COVID or during COVID, actually, is how someone would collect. It's a little complicated. We could dive into it, but you'll have this access in your guides. But really, it's just showing that you could collect unemployment really no matter what or how, and this factors in the $600, which we mentioned before is no longer active. If you're already approved for UI benefits, you could receive the $600, not anymore. If you were eligible, you would apply and deemed not eligible, you would apply for PUA. So if you applied for unemployment, you were denied, you could file for PUA and still collect the $600, which no longer applies. And then if you had exhausted your unemployment benefits, you're eligible for a week's extension or multiple weeks extension. So this slide, I could have done a number of slides per item, and this is where I'll touch most on, but what we need to do is just cover the harsh reality of where we stand with unemployment as employers. So the first thing that needs to be understood is this is completely unprecedented. There was the financial crash 2008, 2009, which caused a huge influx, but really that is nothing compared to what we're seeing now. So we need to get our expectations in line as employers and TPAs of employers as to the reality. Now, I do have clients who will call, especially at the beginning, and they were upset thinking that as the employer, they weren't doing what they needed to do or could do. And as the TPA, we weren't at the same time. They were saying, call the state of Florida for me, find out this claim result. We had to align expectations knowing that the states are flooded. I cannot express to you how behind they are. Various states will get into problem states, but you have states that still have hundreds of thousands of people who are not getting paid. They are still pending claims. They have claims that you responded to in April that they haven't held a hearing for, nor can they anytime soon. People are still underwater, and it will take a while to shake out. But we just need to realize this is unprecedented for the industry. I hope this leads to improvements going forward. But the industry was not ready for this. It was already having issues when we were at low unemployment, and now they're really underwater. So states are doing their best to go ahead and work with employers and TPAs to make sure that we're getting people paid who should be getting paid and that we're correcting erroneous charges where we need to. But just keep in mind, this is unprecedented. So you are not alone in not being able to reach the state or having issues with claims and so on. So keep that in mind as we go through this. Now, someday that will become null and void, but for right now, we're still in the thick of it. One thing you'll notice is a delay in unemployment-related documentation. So I assume you all, depending on the state, some are better than others, but we're even seeing documents coming in from a month ago where the claim was sent. Now that's either the state processing and sending it out where they date stamp it, but they didn't mail it out yet, or they're blaming it on sometimes the US Postal Service, what have you. But there's a litany of reasons why we are getting documentation late. So that is continuing. I will speak to how do we fix that in a later slide, but just keep in mind that that's really the reality of the situation. You have full protest rights if someone sends you a document from the state, it's postmarked a month ago, you should still be protesting those claims. This is not on you. Let's say a document was sent to a location and you didn't respond to it for a month. That may be on you. You may have lost protest rights, but if you're checking the mail constantly and you get a claim that is late, you should act as if it isn't. The states are still underwater, and a lot of them are being receptive to us responding late and just indicating, hey, we received this late, but we are wanting to respond. So documents are going to be late. Pending determinations and decisions. I deliver reports to my clients, especially larger clients, on a frequent basis. What we're seeing is a ton of pending claims, meaning we responded to the claims. We haven't heard back from the state. That is the majority of claims that we're seeing now. So even claims that we responded to in May and June, we had responded to, and in our reports, we haven't received a determination or decision back, although we are seeing we're being charged for it. So that's a massive issue that will continue for some time, but keep in mind that you'll be seeing this. State contacts unreachable. This is still occurring to the best of my knowledge. Some states you can pick up the phone, you can call, you can get an answer on a specific claimant. Many you cannot. Like I said, I have a direct line to a number of deputy directors of various states, and even they are having trouble responding. So, I would continue, if you have an inquiry or question that needs to be answered directly from the state, I would continue trying, but just know that you're not doing anything wrong. I would get creative, maybe Googling various people's numbers. Sometimes they provide a number on the claim that is a little bit more helpful than a general number. You just want to be active in trying to find the correct number, but the reality is sometimes you just may not get through. Excess charges and delayed corrections. I will get into this in a further slide, but this is the biggest problem we're seeing right now. I go through a charge statement, especially for reimbursers who are paying dollar for dollar. You are seeing a number of erroneous and excess charges. What happened was the priority was made to pay claimants as soon as possible. They realized people without paychecks can't pay rent. There will be massive issues throughout the country, and the states, rightly so, wanted to pay these claimants, if they deserve unemployment, as quickly as possible so they could float this terrible time. In doing so, they paid out claimants who should not have been paid. We'll get into it in a minute here, but there's a lot of erroneous excess charges. So to Angela, who asked about the 50,000 credit, if you go through those lines, I guarantee you will find some that should not be charged, and you want to protest those charges with the state. Excuse me. New process for hearings. This is not taken hold in every state, but it certainly will, hopefully at some point, but I'll use Texas as an example. What happened was, because there's so many unemployment claims, if you or the claimant protests an unemployment claim, typically that generates a hearing. Hearing can last 15 minutes to 2 hours. It's a very detailed process. What's happening right now is, just because of the volume and the need to process hundreds of thousands of hearings, get them over with, the state is trying to do is bulk hearings together. So I've seen a lot of my clients in Texas is the one I know for sure, where they are getting on a hearing and they are discussing 10 claims. Whereas it used to be 1 claim per hearing. Now you're really running through a list of 10 claims. I think it's a preferable situation, because if you have 10 people who shouldn't have collected, you appealed those determinations and went to a hearing. It's better than picking up the phone, having an hour slot, discussing one. It's nice to get all those together. So that's a change you'll see. Employee complaints. This is a touchy subject. What happened during the unemployment and COVID crisis was the states were really unprepared to handle this, and you all were blamed. In some circumstances, not others. So what happened was, someone filed for unemployment. They waited a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. What happened was these people were getting irate at the states, as they should have. They reached out saying, what's going on with my claim? I need payment. The states oftentimes, not all times, were coming back and saying, we are waiting for a response from the employer. I will tell you that we responded to every single claim we received via CCC. I cannot tell you how many times I had caught states telling my employers and their employees that we had not responded, when I have solid factual proof of an electronic response being sent. The state then indicates, oh, we did get that. Let me process your claim. You all were blamed for a lot. We were blamed for a lot that doesn't really reflect what exactly happened. So just keep in mind, you may have some employees coming back to you saying, you all need to respond to my claim. That's not how unemployment works. If you all don't respond by a deadline, typically pre-COVID, the state would pay the claimant because you all forfeited your rights. There is no state that should be waiting 2 months to pay someone saying they're waiting for your response. In no way are you given 2 months to do so. So just keep in mind, if you're seeing employee complaints like that saying they're waiting on you, odds are, from my research, that is incorrect. There may be some circumstances where they sent it last week. They are waiting for your response before the due date. But if someone comes to you, said, I filed 2 months ago, they're waiting on your response, that's just simply inaccurate, and the state is at fault there. Problem states, we're seeing state meltdowns one after the other. California just had a 2-week shutdown not long ago because of all the fraud cases. They also had 600,000 claims that had not been paid or processed. This is their words, not mine. So you're seeing a lot of problems. Florida, I understand that their system just completely shut down. Same with Massachusetts. They're having a lot of issues. So almost every state has their own unique issue that they're seeing. Some states are run fine. I know Colorado, their website was down for a while, so they're all trying to weather the storm, but you're seeing a ton of problems in each state. And then fraud, we will get to separately. This is a major issue that is picking up in every state. I will dive into it, how to protect you all, what to expect in a separate slide, but just keep in mind that this is every state. It is increasing. It used to be that it was one state a year. So what happened was a group of hackers had information from years ago, a major data breach or two that has nothing to do with you or I. It just happened, unfortunately. They had that information and they would target 1 to 2 states a year. I remember a few years ago, it was New Mexico, where they just ran through all the socials they had in New Mexico. They applied, some people got paid and they made money, some were caught. So it used to be state by state. The states care very much. Federal entities come in and assist and they catch those people typically, and they rectify the situation within the year. What happened was everyone found this an opportune time, understandably, to try to go ahead and file for fraudulent claims. When the system is already overloaded, it makes sense that people would try to take advantage of that, and they did. So we'll dive into that in a moment, but just keep in mind that that is a major issue. So if you haven't seen anything on it yet, I would be prepared for the instance that not a lot, but a number of claims are fraudulent within your caseload. So I think Prince, now I see there's a number of questions. So I think Prince, now if you have any pertinent that I could answer for the next 5 to 10 minutes, and then we could go ahead, finish the presentation, and I'll try to answer the remaining questions.
Let me see, I'm looking at the questions. I think Angela still has a question. Angela, did you want me to unmute you? You can just message. Angela, you're unmuted.
Okay, so I asked about what would be the benefit, not-for-profit organization, what's the benefit between a reimbursable plan and the taxable plan?
Well, it used to be that it would save significant money. You as a reimburser have the opportunity to actually be taxable. The switch, I believe, is it takes a while and it's a pain. And then if you commit to that switch, you cannot switch back for a number of years, is my understanding. It was always fortuitous to be reimburser. We do an analysis for our clients if they would be better off being contributory if they're reimbursing. It is extremely rare, and I've never seen it in my 10 years where we've done that analysis and say that actually if you paid a tax, you'd be saving money. So it is yet to be clear if in COVID that being a taxable employer versus reimburser is the best case, but typically it was always hands down. You wanted to be a reimburser if you were allowed that status.
Can I ask one more question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if we worked from home, so we didn't get paperwork, and we checked our system late, and we found, there were a number of people that were charged that were erroneous. Mm-hmm. Can we go backwards if it's like back in July or June or?
Yep, absolutely, yeah. And you should. So I'll dive into that in a little bit later in the presentation, but you have full rights. This is going to be a battle for a long time. So we just need to get used to that fact. I have a city in the state of California who half of their charges were erroneous, people who never worked for them, active people who are working right next to them who are not monetarily eligible. Yep. There are unlimited, I cannot even fathom how many, and I can't wait for the data to come out someday as far as the percentage of claims that are charged at erroneous. You have full protest rights, in our opinion, for years to come. There. So the states, it will take a while. They will have to figure out how are they going to recoup this money from these individuals if they were paid erroneously. Will there be some federal legislation that assists in paying you all back quickly later down the road? But for right now, an actionable takeaway is if you see someone erroneously paid, you should go ahead and alert the state. I'll try to figure out, and maybe I'll send something in a follow-up later on, but just how exactly a company who doesn't use corporate cost control would do that, but I'll get you some information there. My assumption is typically you would just go ahead and provide an Excel sheet and the reason these people shouldn't have collected, send it to the state, and they'll have charge departments. They'll work through that and help you out.
And then should you still pay the bill?
It depends. So I would look at when the bill is due. It is an expectation that if the bill is due, that you should pay it, whether it's 100% and they would reimburse you the 50. But yes, you should pay the bill, and then the charges will come back on subsequent bills. So you'll see refunds going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Perfect. Any other questions?
I saw Jeanette just ask basically the same question. In case we were need to protest charges, do we pay? Yes, that's how it's always worked. I'm hoping, and my thought, and I'll get into this in a minute, is you should wait as long as possible to pay this bill, because something may come out. I had clients in California who got the bill, they paid the bill at 100%. They got a bill 2 weeks later, it was 50%, and it was pushed out as far as when they had to pay it. So they actually did not benefit from paying early. So I would wait until you absolutely have to pay it. Keep in mind that the states may extend the time of payment. They may also deduct how much you have to pay. So I would always hold off till the last minute, but that is an unofficial recommendation just by me, not corporate cost control.
And Dane, I have one more before we start again.
And then we'll get back.
Yep. Clarissa had a question stating, if you are a nonprofit to be reimbursable, or is it a filing status that you should select? Does that make any sense?
So I believe when you set up your SUI number initially, whenever your company began, that you would have to select reimbursable or taxable, or it would be in a designation that the state selected based on your entity. I would just try to find out from the state if you are reimbursable, but keep in mind that you can go to taxable if you find it to be a good savings. It rarely does, but yes, if you're nonprofit, 99% you are a reimbursing client, and that was designated at your creation.
Okay.
Well, I'll finish up. I hope this has been helpful so far. Really, it's been me complaining about unemployment, but I'll get into some actionable items in a second here that you can take away. And I guarantee at least one of these, maybe I haven't thought about. I hope that it's a good help for you all. So just to cover the benefit charges, like I said, here's what you can expect on your erroneous charges. So I have a number of clients where I broke down everything, and the beauty of having tracking systems like we do, especially for larger clients, is I can compare what we were charged as compared to how did we respond to the state. And it clearly shows where the issues are. So I would just run through, I'd highlight all those that are erroneous that match this listing, and I would simply protest all those to the state. So it's kind of nice setup. It's a little late right now for you all or anyone interested in the service, but it's nice knowing going forward, even without COVID, there's erroneous charges. So that's something we handle as benefit charges, but I promise I wouldn't be too salesy. So what you will see on your benefit charges, claims you never received. So you will be receiving charges for claims that were never sent to you. The state had a ton of those where they just paid people. They didn't send you all a claim. You were not afforded the opportunity to respond, and I would protest those. Claims you won. So I've seen hundreds of claims that have been won by my client. The state responded with the determination saying you all will not be chargeable. If the claimant wants to appeal, they can do so. That's a win for you all. You should not be charged. We're seeing the state still charged you by accident. And these are things we always look for, COVID or not, but now it's popping up more and more. Claims the state never told you you lost, so you responded to a claim. They never sent a determination telling you, did you win, did you lose? Therefore, you did not have ample rights, or you have the rights, but you were not given the opportunity to respond and protest. You should be protesting those because they didn't tell you you lost. You never were given the opportunity to fight at a hearing to prove that you should not be charged. People who don't work for you, we see this all the time, even pre-COVID, they'll assign the wrong SUI number to the wrong claimant. They'll send it to the other entity for which the person actually worked. They won't respond to it, and you will get hit with the charge. Fraudulent claims, we'll get into that in a minute, but a lot of these claims may be fraudulent. Oh, sorry. And then you'll even see claims for employees who are legitimately still full-time. So a lot of the fraudulent claims Our people who are working full-time didn't apply, didn't know they even applied, so someone else did. But there are some who just simply applied because they thought, hey, I talked to my mom, she said I can collect unemployment. I did, and guess what? The state paid me. Well, they shouldn't have. If someone's working full-time for you all and nothing's changed in your hiring agreement, that person wouldn't even be monetarily eligible. They are collecting more than the weekly benefit amount. The state should have cut that out right there and said, you are collecting $2,000 a week. You don't have eligibility monetarily. We're not even looking at whether or not you could collect based on the separation reason. They failed in that responsibility. So you are going to see a lot of claims for people who are still working. They didn't file fraudulently. They just said, hey, I can collect unemployment, and the state paid them when they shouldn't. And lastly is base period claims. We can't protest these in all states, but just a base period claim, quite simply, in the scenario we talked about in the initial warm-up there, was someone worked for you, they separated, they went to work at another organization, and they separated there. Some states, if you're a reimburser client, state of California, you are stuck with a percentage of that bill. Even though it's not your fault that they left, worked for someone else and left there, you may still be paying for that bill, unfortunately. So that's the reality. Now, some states like Texas, you will not be paying for that. You have protest rights for base period claims there. So we can send some more information if you have questions. It's a little bit more complicated than the time we have allotted here. But keep in mind, if you're paying for claimants who had left half a year ago, that makes sense, and there may be a reason why. So my recommendation is, if you are of a smaller entity and you have a charge statement that has 50 charges on it, I would run through that line by line. That's something we do automatically for you as an unemployment vendor. But if you're not using us, or you're not large enough to, whatever the reason, I would just recommend, especially if it's under 50. If it's more, you may not have the resources or time to do so, but I think it behooves everyone. And especially if you're reimbursing, you catch one of those fraud or incorrect charges, you're saving thousands of dollars for doing so. So I cannot stress that enough. Let's get into fraud. And as I had mentioned before, we're going to send some documentation information. One of those is a guide on fraudulent claims. Like I said, this is picking up state by state. I don't know if there's any states that haven't been affected by it, but what's happening is not your fault. So this information likely came from a large crediting company who had a large data breach. I believe it was 2011, 2007. But there's a number of ways that fraudsters can get your information. It's not you now. So I have clients freaking out saying, hey, cancel our data feed, we've been hacked, whatever. No, that's not the case in these situations. And on a side note, we're SOC 2 certified. We have high security. So that wouldn't happen. But at the same time, it is not your fault. So again, this information is out there on the dark web. I could go buy it right now if I so chose. That would be illegal, of course, and I wouldn't do that. But your information is out there. That's the information you're using. So do not panic that there's a leak or someone's hacked you. That's certainly possible at any time. So be vigilant, but that is likely not the case here. What I would do is consult the fraud guide. So when you have access to that, download it, review it. It has a ton of good information there. Another thing I would mention, and this is kind of a pro tip, is ask around. So if you get a claim for someone who works down the hall from you, it is not illegal to inquire whether they filed for unemployment or not. And they may be one of those people who, like I said in the example, their mom told them they could collect unemployment. They filed. Why not? It's extra money and everyone needs it. And they were granted benefits incorrectly by the state. That may happen. But if someone is full-time working for you all, nothing changed in their hiring agreement, and they're filing for unemployment, I don't see any legality issues with you just walking down the hall and saying, hey, did you file for unemployment? We just want to make sure it's fraud. So you're doing it in the employee's interest. Now, if you tell them or block them from collecting unemployment, that may be a problem, but just inquiring, there's nothing wrong there, especially in an age of fraud. So if they say, in the example I think I saw Angela had provided, they say, no, I never filed, that is fraud. What do? Is you take the next steps of responding to the claim. So if you all use us and we reached out, you find out, hey, this is fraudulent claim, you just need to let us know. We would indicate that to the state. If you're not and you're responding to claims in-house, you would just respond to the claim indicating this is fraudulent. I spoke to the employee. This is 100% fraud. Do not grant benefits. Have the employee contact the state. Now, this is the number one thing that needs to be done, is if someone in the state of Florida, for example, realizes that there is fraud against them, they need to report it themselves, not you as the employer. They need to. And every state has a nice fraud response unit, if you will. Typically, you can just answer some questions online and have it sent in, and they'll take it from there. That is also in the guide. But number one, regardless of if you respond, the employer can't do much more than having the employee contact the state. And then what I'm recommending to my clients is just tracking claims that are marked fraudulent, not only to look in the benefit charges later, but let's say later on something come down the pike in the way of legislation or law. It's just nice to have that information saying, you know, these were all fraudulent, and you can even send it to the state again just to remind them to get working on this, make sure they rectify the situation. So the biggest question, how will you pay for this? So tax-paying employees, what they call it is a potential social tax. Every state is different, and we'll have information in the guide about how you're going to pay. But for tax-paying, aka contributory employees, there's what they call a social tax. So what they're saying is in most states, you will not be paying, or your merit rate will not be affected negatively by COVID claims, but they're just going to increase UI taxes for all employers to cover it. Because again, from our first slide, you all pay into the state pays the claimant. If the state's paying out the claimant in excess unimaginable numbers, they're going to have to recoup that money to resupply the funds, essentially, to pay those claimants. So you all will pay for it in the back end. So an example of what we expect is if your company is at the lowest rate of, let's say, 1% of taxable payroll in a state, the state may come back to you and say, hey, you're still in the lowest rate bracket, but the lowest rate bracket is now 1.5. Again, this would be a 10-hour discussion if we wanted to go over individual states, but we have information on our website. Certainly, you can even Google this pretty easily as well. Reimbursing employers, like we had mentioned before, most states have indicated relief of 50% of benefit charges. Some are sending out new bills. Some are asking that you pay 100%, and they say, we'll get you back later. I would prefer that they just sent the bill of 50%. It is not my choice. I always get scared when you're expecting money from the state rather than vice versa. So if that is a recommendation of the state to pay by December, whatever, you should follow those rules. You should not protest or not pay. There could be some fines or penalties associated, but I would recommend paying as late as possible in case anything changes, and then pay the amount requested. But just keep in mind, if you're paying 100%, you should be receiving a check to cover that other 50% back. And then what can you do right now? And this more pertains to clients not using us at all, because we do this really for you. But even if you said, hey, the presentation was great, the service looks helpful, I just can't even wrap my mind around this for the next year, what have you, we understand. We're working with PayMaster so that you as their clients can get the information you need. Certainly we would want, you all as a client, but completely understand. So let's imagine this just isn't for you right now. I would just recommend taking away, consult the website regularly for updates. You will be provided that information, a link. It's corporatecostcontrol.com. You would go into, I believe it's CCC News and Bulletins. Anytime we get an update for a state, we'll go ahead and throw it in there. You'd be able to search, I believe, by state, try to get some more information. So I would just recommend making that part of a weekly routine. See if something big changes, anything that will impact your business. Monitor your benefit charges. We went into that in detail, but just keep an eye out. If you have the time to go through every line item, make sure that you weren't charged erroneously. I would mark those that are charged and then reach out to the state, particularly their benefit charge departments, and go ahead and ask them, how do we protest these? These are erroneous, and explain why. Prevent fraud. Ask if employees filed if they're still active. Again, you get someone who's right down the hallway, you see a claim for them, I would just walk down and say, we're not trying to stop you. We just want to prevent any type of fraud. Did you file this? Respond to all claims. Some states agree with my philosophy, some not, but it is our opinion, and this is how we represent our clients, that if we received a document correctly and it's late from the state, we should have protest rights, and we will be protesting as if it is a regular claim. If they sent it to a location and someone there sent it 2 months later because they forgot about it, that's on the employer. But if the state sends it to us in channels late, or if we're a power of attorney, for example, and they send it to God knows where, we have protest rights. So I would respond to all claims, especially if you have the opportunity and time to do so. Late or not, you should just be responding. And then monitoring your pending claims. So I would keep a separate list. Again, this is if you don't use us. I would mark if you've received a response or not. So let's say I file for a claim against you all today. You respond to the claim. I would just keep some type of Excel, some type of monitoring saying the Dane Swenson claim we sent 2 months ago, we haven't received a response. And then you can cross-reference that list with your benefit charges later on. So next quarter, if you see I was charged, but you hadn't received a response, you're essentially doing our benefit charge auditing, which we do on our client's behalf. I see we're coming up on time and we need a little bit of Q&A. So I'll try to go through these fairly quickly. So what to expect next? We expect changes in tax rate schedules. New Hampshire was the first. That's where I was born. They provided next year's rates, and that was with a hike or a social tax, is my understanding. So you should expect hearing from various states as to their new rate schedules, it's called. Benefit charge reimbursements for erroneous charges. We need to see how states are going to deal with this, because we've sent in protests that are large Excels. We need to find out from them, when are you going to pay our employers back? How are you going to get this money back? And right now, most of them are just not sure. And hopefully there's some assistance or more relief. Increase in attention to auditing. Because of all the frauds, you're going to receive a ton of wage audits now. I would respond to those if possible, but just keep in mind that's going to be a huge spike. Same with UI integrity enforcement with penalties. So UI integrity is a federal mandate for employers to provide claims at claim level, or documents at claim level. I would just recommend doing so, because as time goes on, these states will want money one way or another. So they will find ways to do that, and some states will be starting to implement penalties for you failing to respond with adequate information. That's another reason to use a third party like ourselves, is we're making sure none of these policies are violated. Employer resources, I think Prince will get this to you all, or there will be a link, or there already is a link through this, but you will have our COVID guide as of, I think it was late October. So things can always change, keep in mind, but feel free to check the website. You have a state agency contact sheet, best way to reach out to the states that we know of. A lot of those will be fruitless, and you will call and they won't pick up, but at least you have that information. Fraud guide, bulletins for legislative updates, that's at our website, and then a copy of this presentation so you can reference it. And then, not to be too salesy, but why do people use companies like CCC, especially now just having up-to-date COVID information, benefit charge auditing, which we discussed in detail, removing administrative burden. We have some clients who, regardless of the fact we win them a crazy amount of claims, that they just don't want to deal with it, because that's they have to hire someone full-time at $40,000, whereas they pay us $10,000, let's say. That's an obvious pick of using a TPA, because there's administrative burden in responding to claims. We still need information from you at the claim level, but when you get up to the hearings, preparing, if you're sending in-house lawyers, that is expensive too. So there's a number of administrative burdens that's relieved. Consultation and experience, having someone who's been in the industry for years and decades. We're all kind of learning together with COVID information, but it's nice having a contact who has a contact to the deputy director who can find out answers to obscure information. That kind of results in collective knowledge. training. We do things like this quite often. I just did another training seminar on what to look for in unemployment reports earlier this week. That is something we constantly do, and we're happy to do for PayMaster as well. We have a national presence, so offices all over the country. I'm in Denver, but we have really everywhere. Hearing representation and preparation, this is something we provide. If you need a rep, we have a representative. If you just need to prepare someone who's new to unemployment as to how a hearing will go, we got you there, and that's actually included in any type of fee associated. Limit mail response and errors. If we can become power of attorney, we can get documents directly to us. That will save you all time. Now you don't have to stress about checking the mail every day. Is this an unemployment documentation? What have you? It would be sent to us. We would remove those errors. And just having these last 2 points, rapport with the DOLs and Board of Reviews. They know that we're no nonsense. Not that they do this in all circumstances, but sometimes you see when we are onboard a smaller client that they've been pushed around a little bit. The states are giving them bad decisions and determinations that they know if they gave us, we would pursue to the ends of the earth and bother them. So we like to think, although I can't quantify it, that having that rapport with the DOLs and BORs is certainly helpful. And then lastly, whether you're a client or not, we aren't lobbying for your interests, especially right now. We are here to help. You guys are being treated. Obviously, this is a bad situation for everyone, but employers, it's not being reported on the news as much, but employers are really feeling the burden. You all are having sleepless nights, I assume. If you own a company, if you're in human resources, there's a lot that it's going against you. So we are constantly working on your behalf as an employer to make it a little bit more fair and make sure that you all are taken care of in a crazy time for all. So that being said, I appreciate your time today. Hopefully you had one takeaway or one follow-up note that you took down that could protect you from paying too much or answered some questions there. So I guess I will allot the remainder of the time to any types of questions, concerns we may have. I'll try to answer any specific ones, but keep in mind the documents we're sending after this or that are in the link should answer the majority of them.
Thanks, Dane. Thanks, Dane. Looks like Angela had a stream of questions. Did you want me to unmute you, Angela?
Sorry, this is obviously on top of mind. Can you be charged for unemployment when someone had a contract where they knew it was in their offer letter, they knew that they were going to work from 1 year to the next, and then their employment was going to end at that time?
Like a 1099?
No, we had like a internship. Someone that's an employee, an employee.
Yeah, and they were a paid internship?
Yeah, it was a paid internship, and they knew they're going to work January to December, and it said this is your internship is from this to this. Are they still eligible for unemployment?
My answer is yes, although there's some gray area, and that's something I would protest or at least alert the state that they were fully acknowledging the fact that they were only working a set amount of time, but they would have received those wages and you would have ended their assignment. So technically, a lot of states would look at that and say, yes, they should collect, although I would recommend at least alerting them and seeing if you can get a favorable determination.
Could employees who had their hours cut by 25% be eligible for unemployment?
It depends. So to be eligible for part-time unemployment, and boy, could I spend hours on this, but for every state is different, but the simple way to think about it is, are they receiving more in pay than they are in weekly benefit amount? So let's say in Colorado, $400 weekly benefit amount is what someone may collect. I believe the max is in the $400 a week. If they are receiving a paycheck that is $401, they are not monetarily eligible for unemployment. If they are receiving a check with $399, they could potentially be available for partial unemployment. If you reduce 25%, I would highly doubt, I don't think Florida pays that much. I would doubt that those people are below the weekly benefit amount and therefore would likely not collect. That being said, if you want them to collect, you can actually file for what's called a work share program. Every state typically has one. That's a way that you could allow your employers to employees, excuse me, to have that reduction, but also collect partial unemployment. So that's just something you have to reach out to the state. We actually don't deal with states doing that. They prefer us not to be involved, but I would just Google work share program in Florida and you may be able to collect, but no, typically no, 25%. Sorry to.
No, well, that answers my next question, because if an employee had a 5% pay cut, are they eligible? Okay, are employees who are per diem, where they're like on call, and that's it, they're on call, are they eligible for unemployment?
That depends, especially on the state. So they were per diem upon your request, but now are there no hours to work or just a reduced amount?
There's two parts. There's no hours to work, and then there's other employees who are per diem. We offered work and they declined it.
Okay, if they decline, they should not be collecting unemployment. You would just indicate to the state that they refused an offer of suitable work. It's called, if you went from per diem and you knocked them down to 0 potential hours, they were accepting all available hours, but there were none, they will likely be able to collect unemployment.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah, they were eligible. Okay. Yep.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like we're pretty much wrapping up. Thank you, everybody, for interacting. I'm about to transfer everybody into the lobby. Hopefully, everybody got a chance to fill out the survey. And also, if you were here for credit, you paid attention to the chat messaging bar to put in those credit words that I was putting in every 15 minutes. Other than that, you guys have a great rest of the conference. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dane.